Kevin, um, you know, I believe myself, and I'd like for you to confirm it if you think so also, that the concept of separation of church and state was introduced by, I believe, Jefferson as a primarily as a way to protect the faithful, protect religion, that the state would not encroach upon religion. However, in recent times, whenever I hear, most of the times when I hear separation of church and state, it's being uttered by those who want to stop some kind of religious observance or the use of some government land for a religious uh, manger scene or something like that. And it seems like the idea of separation of between church and state has been twisted or is now used against religion in most cases. I wonder what your take is on that.
Well, yeah, definitely. That is certainly the case. It's almost like the wall of separation is supposed to have four sides, and the religious people are inside the four walls, which is another way to say it's a prison.
Good
And
example.
it really gets back to this issue: what's the proper role of God in the public square?
Yes.
And of course, as we know, the term separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. And as you mentioned, it was a reference that Jefferson uttered in a letter to the Danbury Baptists, who were very concerned that the larger denominations would use the auspices of government power to limit their free exercise of their religion. And of course, Jefferson was trying to assure them that no, we're not going to allow that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But in the modern world, it certainly is a term that has been uh, turned on its head, as you mentioned, and it was the Justice Hugo Black court, I think it was in 1947 or around that time, where he really affirmed the idea that there was a high and impenetrable wall between church and state. And that has been used to erroneously um, represent the idea that America is to be a secular society, a secular nation. And we see examples of that. I think there was a recent story, I think it was out in Washington State, a football coach at the end of the game, he,
Yes.
he would go out to the 50th yard line by himself,
For
just,
years. For years.
yeah, and just kneel and pray. It's a free exercise of religion. And and then it became kind of a thing where some of the players would join, and even some of the players of the opposite team would join. They would meet at the end of the game and pray together at the end of the game. Well, this created a big controversy, and ultimately he was told that if he continues this, he would be fired. So what has happened is now we have the idea that anything under the purview of the government is a religious free zone.
Mm-hmm.
And and actually, I was reading an article where one of the concerns is that the government is owning more and more land in the United States. I think it's up to like a third of the land mass of the country is owned by the government. So technically, from that point of view, this is all religion-free zone. God isn't allowed into that area. And that's a total upside down view of what the founders had intended. That the very purpose of religious freedom is so that religious people, and especially their values, could influence society. As a matter of fact, that influence they viewed as essential to freedom. I think it was Benjamin Rush, who was a signer of the Declaration and the Constitution. He said that without religion, there is no virtue, and without virtue, there is no freedom. So the the idea of freedom and religion as partners was really, that was the common spirit of America. As a matter of fact, when Tocqueville came to America to study the American form of democracy,
Yes.
compared to his own experience in France, the one thing that was such a stark uh, difference than his own experience in France was the idea that he was so amazed that even the most like regular American saw religion and freedom as like hand in glove, that you cannot separate the two. So there was a clear concept that we have freedom, and I think it was St. Paul that says, you know, just because you have the right to freedom, you have to understand that some things are not beneficial, some things are not constructive.
Yes.
And that's where virtue comes in. So our virtue needs to temper our freedom, and we have to take responsibility for our freedom. Otherwise, it turns into licentiousness, and we can do anything and justify anything. And unfortunately, the real fruit of this strict and secular idea of separating church and state is that it has alienated those essential virtues from the public square. I think someone did a study of the public schools when they took prayer out of schools.
Yes.
From that moment, the decline of the ideal of discipline and the rise of drug use and disciplinary problems in school can be traced back to that very moment where prayer and spirituality, which was very much a part of the public school system, was taken away. And also certainly in the realm of higher education. Actually, some of our greatest universities like Harvard, Yale, all started actually as seminaries.
That's right.
The idea of education involving a spiritual education, a moral education, was certainly deeply woven in the fabric of the country. And unfortunately, that idea is, you know, really far behind us. But that's something that we need to renew. The difference today from the 18th century is, in the 18th century, we were largely a Christian nation of Christian denominations. Today, we're a nation of many different religions.
Yes.
But, you know, there is still, of course, we all believe differently and we have the right to believe differently. And that's one important aspect of religious freedom. But the other aspect of religious freedom from the standpoint of the founders was that we can form a partnership. You know, we're all going to disagree on theology, but we can form a partnership on those common values that are germane to good citizenship, to build a moral and ethical nation that's pleasing to God. No matter what your faith background, we should be able to work together for that purpose, because guess what? We live in the same country.
Yes. Yes. And one nation under God is kind of in our DNA, at least for folks like us. That's very, very important. Dennis, would you like to say a few words on how you see the role of religion or religious observance in society? Why is that important? Why is it important to have that aspect? Or can we just get rid of it?
Well, I definitely, I know that a lot of people would like to do that. A lot of secular humanists would like to, you know, kick all the people of faith out of this country, which, you know, pretty much is alignment with a communist view, or at least to control people.
Yeah.
And I think the bottom line is we all are blessed with incredible minds. And within our minds, we have our conscience. And our conscience is something that is very mysterious to a lot of people, but it helps us understand the difference or grasp the difference and also act on the difference between what is right and what is wrong. And that part of us that is our conscience, I feel that needs to be freely exercised. Without that, people can't find faith. They can't find a religion that might have meaning to them, and they couldn't find God. So everybody has a conscience, but for some it's like Swiss cheese. There's a lot of holes in it, or it's very old and not suitable for functioning anymore. I feel that freedom, the freedom of conscience, is a very essence of what the freedom of religion is about. As Kevin was talking about, there might be a lot of other different types of belief systems, but at least these people, I think what faith tries to do for people is help them to be a better person of who they were meant to be. That's the essence, I think. And how do you do that? You strengthen your conscience and you seek. And without being able to do that, you then are severely limited. You're put into that little box that Kevin was talking about. That reality is a very stark reality. And I think that nobody really, even if they aren't religious, nobody would want to be in that box. So I think that for most people, they want to be free. And in essence, that innate desire to be free, I believe that comes from God.
That's what Lincoln said. That God
No
takes the love of freedom in every human heart.
Amen. Amen.
Jefferson said that freedom is a gift from God.
I believe that totally.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dennis, for that heartfelt statement. If you enjoyed this discussion, please click the like button and the subscribe button. We'd also love to hear your thoughts on religious freedom.